Sonic the Hedgehog has always been a very puzzling franchise to talk about for me. Despite being a household name in the video game scene for nearly just as long as Mario, for the last 2 decades or so, it's definitely lacked the consistency of their rivals over at Nintendo. One year, they'll release beloved classics like Sonic Mania and Sonic Colors, then within like a year's time, they'll crap out something like Sonic Forces. It seemed like the devs over at Sonic Team could never really grasp what people liked about their own franchise. But, thankfully, in the last few years or so, they've started to revise themselves almost. Newer games like Sonic Frontiers and Shadow Generations brought a fresh new atmosphere to the once dry Sonic gameplay style, and brought back even people like me who had walked away from the franchise during my teenage years. While them managing to breathe new life into the franchise through new and improved games is definitely something worth praising, it's not the only new breath of fresh air that they've managed to bring to this series. One of the major appeals to Sonic's franchise is the colorful cast of characters that they've accumulated throughout years of games. From Shadow to Tails to Blaze to Sage, the cast of Sonic, both new and old, are the backbone of the franchise. But something that I noticed after finishing Shadow Generations is how stale all the characters have felt. Comparing Shadow during Generations to his appearance in other Sonic games and spin-off media like in the Sonic Boom show, it's not even a question as to what the better written version is. Up until very recently, the characters of Sonic were only allowed to be archetypes, not characters. Shadow was only allowed to be the cool, edgy rival character to Sonic, and not the three-dimensional, mature character that he was originally designed to be. Amy was only allowed to be the love-struck, girly character that endlessly chased Sonic, not the more empathetic, emotionally driven character that they started to shift her towards. You can see this with many of the other core casts of Sonic's friends that have been around since the beginning, and how static and two-dimensional they've all become. Now, with Frontiers and Shadow Generations, they've started to go the extra mile in giving the core characters a bit more agency, making them feel like actual characters rather than just stereotypes. And that includes Sonic himself. Sonic, from my perspective, had it just as bad as the rest of the supporting cast when it came to characterization. Games like Colors and Forces made him feel less cool and more obnoxious, and definitely soured my view of the character for a very long time. It's so bad that, to this day, some fans still think that his writing currently is terrible. But in that regard, I have to disagree. And that's thanks to one supplementary piece of media, the IDW Comics. Released just under a year after Sonic Forces, this first seemed to be nothing more than a fun spin-off series, a non-canon yet entertaining comic run to replace the defunct Archie comics. But what we ended up getting instead was a very canon series that seemed to understand Sonic as a character more than any game had in nearly a decade. It introduced us to the wider world of Sonic, gave us new and interesting ideas and world building to latch onto, and introduced us to some of the best characters the series had ever seen, and most importantly, reintroduced us to Sonic the Hedgehog as a character. As we dive into this, I think it's important we talk about the one moment in the comics that, from my understanding, launched this entire debate over the characterization of Sonic in these comics: his speech during the fight with Surge. Just so there's no communication with what he actually says, I'm going to read it word for word here. I live for the moment. I want to see the world, find all its thrills and adventures, and enjoy them. I want everyone else to have the freedom to do that too. And you wouldn't get that opportunity if I took that chance away from you. I've made peace with enough enemies to know that there's a better way, so I'm willing to chalk this up to a rocky start and start over. Yeah, you thought I was going to do a Sonic impression for that, huh? Not a chance. This is the groundwork for all of Sonic's decisions moving forward, and it's the thesis for this entire video. This talk of freedom and wanting others to enjoy this same freedom. The first arc of this series, I think, does a pretty good job of showcasing this mindset and setting it up to be Sonic's whole thing moving forward in this comic. After Metal Sonic is defeated in the first arc, instead of trashing him like Eggman's other creations, Sonic gives Metal Sonic the opportunity to live his life free of Eggman's influence. Does he go straight back to Eggman anyways? Yes, but in his defense, he thought that Eggman was gone and replaced with the Tinkerer. Speaking of which, he displays the same thought process with him. Shadow and the others want him to face justice for his crimes, but Sonic intervenes, explaining that as long as he genuinely doesn't remember his past and is not harming anyone, he doesn't have a problem with it. Now, I talked to many Sonic fans in preparation for this video, some that loved this new take on this character, and some that were more mixed, and some that just thought it was straight up bad writing. The mixed opinions on this comic's take on this character was very interesting for me as an outsider, and I took all the info that I had gotten and tried to gather it up into a few talking points that I'm going to go over today, and try to figure out the disconnect between certain fans and this take on Sonic, and the takes from years past. Firstly, there are 3 eras of Sonic that I want to establish before continuing because each one is important to this video in some way. There's the Dark Age, yes that's what it's called, aka the 2000s era. This includes games like Sonic Unleashed and Sonic and the Black Knight, which are considered the best in terms of Sonic's character writing. There's the 2010s, which includes everything in between Colors and Forces, and is considered some of Sonic's worst writing. Finally, there's the modern day, which as of right now is just Frontiers, Shadow Gens, and most importantly, for today's video, the IDW Comics. From everyone I've talked to, the Dark Ages, despite its track record of having some of the most frowned upon games in the franchise, has many games where Sonic is supposedly written at his highest quality. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time to play through both of these games in 2 weeks while also needing to do everything else to make sure that this video came out in a timely manner. So I went through some cutscenes that were recommended to me, and thankfully I was able to come to some conclusions. Sonic during the Dark Age was written very much like a free spirit, perhaps even more so than any other era of this franchise. He's cocky, confident, and friendly to people he meets. If someone's in trouble, he's on it, no problem.
Oh, I get it. No problem. I'm used to stuff like this.
He's also very loyal to his friends, and if someone's in trouble, he'll just help them, no questions asked.
Here on out, it's my responsibility, so, there's no reason for you to come along, so I should just...
Do I need a reason to want to help out a friend?
In short, this version of Sonic can be described as someone who does whatever he thinks is right, regardless of if it's reckless or if it doesn't make sense to others. If someone's in trouble, if Eggman's causing issues, he'll be there, and he'll blast through all of it with a cocky smile on his face and a free-spirited attitude. Now, let's move on to the IDW Comics. Specifically, let's start with this panel from one of the very first issues. It's what I do. Just keep moving forward, doing good, saving folks, and living free as the wind. Living by my way, my own way. I don't know about y'all, but I can definitely hear Jason Griffith's voice over this little speech. This is a comic that, at least on a fundamental level, understands what Sonic's all about right from the very start. A hedgehog that believes in living life to his fullest and doing what he thinks is right, and desires others to be able to have the freedom to do the same as well. This doesn't sound too unlike how Sonic is portrayed during the Dark Age. So what's the issue? Well, I think it boils down to presentation. Sonic, for as long as he's existed as a character, has never been one for speeches. All of his most iconic lines are normally one-liners. He's not someone like Captain America or Optimus Prime who will casually drop a super inspiring speech. He's more of a show-don't-tell kind of character, and has been ever since the beginning. He says so in Sonic Adventure 2.
What you see is what you get. Just a guy that loves adventure. I'm Sonic the Hedgehog.
But here he is in IDW, dropping speech after speech after speech. Now, maybe it's because I'm looking at this as more of an outsider, someone who was into the Sonic series for a bit as a casual fan, then walked away for half a decade, but in all of the long-winded speeches that he's given, I don't really have a problem with what he's saying on a fundamental level. Everything sounds in character. I think the main issue that I, and many other fans that I've talked to have, is that, well, it's preachy, and Sonic has never been preachy. Between his monologue to Surge and some of his other speeches to other characters later in the story, Sonic has gained sort of a track record among the fandom for being much more preachy and speech-prone throughout the comics, and it's left a bad taste in some fans' mouths, which is completely understandable. Sonic is the kind of character to let his actions speak for themselves. Very similarly to how I described Mario, instead of just trying to justify his actions or why he does what he does, he'll just do that and let you find that out for yourself. Because of that, I think this moment with Surge has led to some people getting the idea that they're trying to turn Sonic into more of a Superman type. And while I understand where they're coming from, I think there's something a bit more meta going on. Sonic, and the rest of his cast up until this point in the franchise, weren't allowed to be characters in the traditional sense. The comics were still trying to get over this terrible status quo that Sega had settled on during the 2010s, where every character had to fill an archetype rather than be a dynamic character. Sonic during this time acted more like a Saturday morning cartoon character rather than a free-spirited, thrill-seeking optimist that he's supposed to be. But something must have happened in between the beginning of this comic and this speech, because from this point onward, Sonic's writing improves dramatically. He starts acting more like the version from the Dark Ages that everyone adores so much, and it all starts with his speech with Surge. In my eyes, Sonic's speech to Surge is just as much directed towards the readers as it is towards her. It's letting the audience know that, hey, this is what Sonic's all about, and this is what he's going to be about moving forward. And to their credit, they were right. I'm not fully caught up with the IDW comics. In fact, I'm pretty sure I'm very far behind. But from my personal experience, the part about the comics that I've enjoyed the most is actually Sonic himself, and the way he interacts with other characters. He feels a lot like the Sonic that people say they love from the Dark Age. I can hear Jason Griffith's voice in most of his dialogue. I think the main difference between the two of them is that it's just written differently. And, well, that's okay. Taken from someone who's been a DC fan for half his life when I say that interpretations of characters can change over time, or sometimes people want to take an already established interpretation of a character and take it in a new direction. And that's what I think is happening with Sonic here. They're taking the already established concept of Sonic's moral outlook and applying it to a different environment, challenging it with characters that won't as easily lie down and accept what he's saying. It's one of the reasons why I think Surge is so interesting as a character, and believe me, I'll definitely be going into this deeper when I make a video about her in the future. I think the best comparison I heard while discussing this with fans for this video is that Dark Age Sonic and modern Sonic are almost like comparing Christopher Reeve's Superman and the new David Cornset Superman. One has more simple writing, and the other is taking that simple writing and adding a bit more on top of it, applying this message from years past that had once been lost on some interpretations in between, and bringing it back for audiences new and old. I understand it's easy to be distrustful of new content involving characters that have been around for as long as Sonic, because it's easy for the original message of a character or franchise to be lost in pursuit of continuing a brand. But rest assured that I don't think that's the case with Sonic here. Between IDW and Frontiers, I think we're really on track to see a renaissance of the franchise. With the game quality, sure, but also with the characters themselves, which I'd argue is much more important. People love these characters. Sonic is a childhood hero of so many people around the world. Where some people had Spider-Man or Batman, these people had Sonic. His games were there when they went to escape the world and get lost in fantasy for just a little bit. And honestly, I sympathize with having to deal with nearly 10 years of questionable characterization. And I understand the feeling of suspicion that they have when it's replaced with something that's seemingly familiar, but slightly off. But to that I say, just open your mind a bit. Because the more you strap yourself to the past, the more you restrict yourself from exploring future possibilities. Because when you do, you'll never know what you'll find. And honestly, I can't think of anything more Sonic the Hedgehog than that. Thank you for watching. This was probably the most research I've ever done for a video because, well, I know jack all about Sonic compared to other franchises I've covered on this channel, so I had to reach out to a lot of people who knew more about this franchise than I did and get their takes. But eventually, I was able to come to my own conclusions about the franchise and Sonic's character. I'll definitely be returning to the IDW Comics specifically in the future to talk about Surge, who is by far my favorite character in not only the comics, but the whole Sonic franchise. I love anti-thesis characters like her, and the way she highlights Sonic's fatal flaw is honestly fascinating. But that's a video for another day. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.